are some of the best known VCs in the game, like Draper Fisher Jurvetson, Founders Fund, and Lux Capital. Please join me in welcoming Joe.
All right, thanks, Andrew. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for getting up early. I guess not that early, but seemed early. First of all, I wanted to thank the Space Frontier Foundation for putting this conference on and congratulate the whole team. I think it has been an amazing time, tremendous success, and really has brought the industry together. So I'm also looking forward to today, and we get to talk about the financing of space startups and get into some more talk about entrepreneurship in the industry, which is really exciting to me personally. So everyone has been talking about commercial space. Everyone has been talking about commercial space and all the exciting progress and news that's going on. What I'd like to do this morning is to share some analysis and insight that we've come up with at Space Angels Network on private investment in space and our view of where the space economy is headed. At Space Angels Network, we see a number of quantitative proof points that show how the space economy and the space investment market is maturing. First of all, the total amount of investment and number of investors in space is increasing. In 2011, total angel and venture capital investment was about $150 million. And now we see, fast forward to 2015, it's over $800 million. So a lot of growth. The number of venture capital investments, there's been 70 venture capital firms investing in one or more space startup in 2015. That's a 4 times increase from the year before, 2015. Also, there's qualitative indicators of the growth and maturation of the market. We've seen in 2016, the space companies just recently graduate from some of the top tech incubators like Techstars and Y Combinator. Also, this really reinforces our view that space is becoming more integrated with other tech sectors and is starting to be on par with some of the other hot investment sectors, at least in terms of investment. As a result, Space Angels Network is also growing. Our global network of angel investors has completed 4 investments in 2016 already, and we're on track for our most active year yet. And we have 2 deals in the pipeline that we're working on now. We've also seen 100% year-on-year growth in the membership of in our network. So these are individual investors that are accredited investors who are including space in their asset allocation. And I'm really happy to announce this morning that just earlier this week, we crossed the mark of 200 members in 23 countries worldwide. So we've been growing so fast, and we expect this pace of growth to continue. Even in just the last 48 hours, we've had 14 new members join our network. Yesterday, we held a lunch for local Seattle angel investors who weren't necessarily able to make it for the whole conference, but it was sold out with a wait list of people in the local investment community who are interested in space and wanted to learn about it. So it's really exciting. All this points towards future growth of the industry. When we first started Space Angels Network 9 years ago now, most space investors were driven by their excitement for space technology, just being involved in something cool or exploration. Today, though, space investing has evolved from a high-risk passion play for a few visionary investors, and in 2016, it's part of a sophisticated and deliberate investment thesis by more and more of the world's leading investors. So it really is becoming more sophisticated, and investors are taking space more seriously today. As a consequence of the increase in the number of investors, space investing itself has also become more competitive. Angels and VCs are jockeying and lobbying to be part of the best deals. And this trend is towards more of a seller's market in the space investment community. It's a total flip from just a few years ago. Investors held all the cards. They were the ones who really controlled the conversation. Now startups have more power because there's more investors trying to get into these deals. And that's despite the fact that there are more deals happening too. So there's more companies, more investors. It's getting more competitive. And alongside of this increase in activity, we've also seen a dramatic increase in the standards that investors have for space startups. These are sophisticated investors entering the market. They have high expectations, they do more due diligence, and they have more experience investing in startups. They evaluate companies differently. They apply a very critical eye towards these companies. So there's no pass for space startups because they're cool. Business fundamentals matter, and investors are going to be very critical when they evaluate them. So given how dynamic this market is, we did some clean sheet analysis of the space economy to make sense of it for our members and give ourselves a roadmap for how to invest. So this is a brand new look at how to segment the space economy in a way that's mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. This new framework that we've developed is based on the concept of a geography, although not in the traditional sense. There are three geographical regions: terrestrial, in space, and planetary. Terrestrial markets are businesses that create value on Earth. It's the largest and most mature market. It's made up of three segments: satellites, launchers and landers, and media. These are mature markets that exist now and have existed for some time. Terrestrial markets, in-space markets, businesses have products and services that are creating value in space. This includes in-space manufacturing, refueling, servicing, microgravity research, habitats. So these are less mature markets, but they still show a lot of potential in the near term, and we're seeing more and more entrants, more and more entrepreneurs, and more investors interested in these in-space markets. And then finally, the third geographical region is the planetary region. It's made up of businesses that are doing all the same things in the other two regions, but they're doing it away from Earth, on or near a different surface or planet or moon. So they're adding value with cargo to Moon or Mars, in situ agriculture, prospecting and mining of resources, adding value beyond Earth's surface. So we think about it this way as a framework for the space economy, and tried to make it more of a reflection of how we perceive economies on Earth. And it's based on where the value is created. So we find this to be a really helpful way to slice and dice the market. And we also think it'll help investors make sense of the market as it matures and grows. So at Space Angels Network, we invest across all three of these geographical regions today. And that's reflected in the 4 investments that we have participated in already this year. Axion Systems, Worldview, Planetary Resources, and Astrobotic represent that whole spectrum of the 3 regions. So let's dive a little deeper into that market segmentation framework. These are the same, on the right are the same categories from the previous slide. And this chart represents the number of companies in the space industry that have received non-government funding, broken down using this segmentation. So it's important to note that this is not the amount of money companies have raised. It's actually the count of how many companies are raising money. So first of all, there's a lot of companies now. We can see that from the right-hand side of the chart. If we look all the way back, so envision 1958, which the chart doesn't go back that far, when NASA was formed. For a long time, there were only a handful of private companies serving government customers for a long time. The middle part of the chart, you can see the emergence of satellite companies and launcher companies, but still, we don't see that the growth that we're seeing now. We see the tech bubble around 2000 and telecom boom and bust, and then in mid-2009, we start to see companies in more than just the blue and the green come into play. So we're seeing now is exponential growth across all of the different segments in the space economy. It's more growth, and it's not just limited to satellites and launchers. So a lot of people will ask, what's the difference this time around in the space industry? There's been other times when there's been growth and companies raised money, and what's to say this isn't another boom and bust cycle that's not going to have a consistent growth engine behind it. So I would propose that we actually have a more robust growth engine here, evidenced by this graph. It's not just 1 or 2 companies raising a whole lot of money. It's 160 companies raising money across all these different segments. So it's not ICO and Global Star, and it's hundreds of companies. So to me, that suggests a more robust and lasting foundation for growth for the industry, which gets investors really excited. And sophisticated investors, they see this, and they're taking the market seriously and want to invest in advance of the growth and participate in the upside that is yet to come in this industry. So all that together, I think it is absolutely the right time to invest in space. And we've got more companies, better companies, and more sophisticated investors vetting those companies, and a sustainable growth engine for the industry. So it's an exciting time to be an investor in space, and it's an exciting time to be an angel investor in space, and particularly you can still capture some of that passion and invest in really cool stuff, but with a more solid financial economic foundation behind the industry. So Space Angels Network's role is to help individual investors make good investments with high returns. We vet and curate investment opportunities, and only about 5% of companies make it through our vetting process. And the value we provide at Space Angels is that we give you clarity on complex technologies, exposure to companies that you wouldn't be able to have access to normally. And we're cultivating a close-knit community, global community of investors, facilitating the right interactions with the best entrepreneurs. So we are purpose-built to help investors learn about the space industry, find the best companies, and make good investments. One of the most popular programs that we have is our members expedition. Every year we do an event to give our members insider access to the best companies in a particular place in the world. We started in Los Angeles and Mojave 3 years ago, or 2 years ago, Seattle last year, which is a fantastic event. I see there's some folks here who participated in that. And I'm happy to announce that this year our Expedition 16 will be in San Francisco, and you'll get an immersive experience in the San Francisco Bay Area startup ecosystem if you join us. It's for our members. There are 20 slots, and it's going to be a really cool trip, so I'm really looking forward to it. So I hope that was helpful, and we'll spark some interesting discussion. Thank you for your attention. I'd love to use the rest of the time to do some Q&A.
Good morning. I'm John Hunefeld, and I have the pillar boat model back there. I'm an aerospace engineer. I've been in the industry for over 25 years, and I've got a lot of hardware in service doing its job. And, you know, I'm a pretty good engineer, but I've never run a business, and I've never hired anybody. So, you know, when I talked to angel investors here in Seattle, and they said, well, you need a business plan. So I'm thinking, well, what good would a business plan be written by an engineer? So is there something that you can do to help build the kind of teams that could do a successful startup and make connections with, you know, business people, with engineering, with marketing, etc.? Is that part of what you do, or it seems like in your comments you're mostly investor focused?
We are. So we serve, it's a great question, by the way. Thank you for asking it. Our service is to the investor community, but in an industry like space, we can't help but help, have to influence and help the entrepreneurial community as well. Well, that's not our focus. There are other groups that are focused on what you're asking for, and I think in particular the Space Frontier Foundation, the NewSpace Venture Labs with Jeff Matthews around here somewhere. I think that's the focus, to help entrepreneurs become investor ready. So there are other groups out there that can definitely help.
Sounds like maybe I'm in the right place then.
You are definitely in the right place.
Right,
Yeah.
thanks.
So Joe, what size are the typical deals that you're doing at Space Angels Network? I mean, it's the Space Angels Network, and the 4 that you put up were Series A and Series B. Are those more typical, or is it more early stage, seed round, pre-seed? Where do you typically fall?
Right, so our strategy is to be early stage. We're typically among the first outside investors in a company. Our average investment size it varies a lot, actually, but it's usually around $500,000 to $1 million from Space Angels Network into a round that's somewhat larger than that. We're typically not the only investors in the round, but we also are opportunistic at some time. So we invested in some later stage companies. You saw even this year, Series B, Series C deal, where in the case of Worldview, we had invested in the previous rounds as well, and the company really wanted us to be involved, and we really wanted to stay involved. So there was opportunity for us to continue investing.
Okay, thanks, Joe.
So you mentioned these geographic regions. Here on Earth, different geographic regions can have chambers of commerce, right? And you know, you're in an interesting spot where you say your goal is to help the individual investors, but you also happen to maybe have an intimate connection with a lot of these companies. So is there any, you know, there's a commercial spaceflight federation, but is there any sort of chamber of commerce-like thing that might help companies that, you know, maybe do group marketing for a certain area, or a topic near and dear to my heart is politics?
So I think the CSF, Commercial Space Flight Federation, is probably as close to that we have, and I think it's a really great group, and it plays a very important role in the industry. We don't have a true sort of analog for a Chamber of Commerce, but one model that we see here in Washington State is the Washington State Space Coalition, which was created by the governor, and there's a team of folks, including myself and some of the other people from Blue Origin, Planetary Resources, and Aerojet, and Boeing, all the companies that have our stakeholders. We get together every so often and talk about, as the Washington region, what can we do to help each other? How can we promote? And this conference being here in Seattle is contributed to this. It is in the way, like, I am a member of that group, so we have a voice in it, as do the other companies, the space companies here in Washington.
Morning. I'm Jen Gastetic. I'm the new SBIR STTR program exec for NASA as of 1 month. I'm wondering how many of the companies that you guys invest in actually apply for or are successful recipients of government sources of funding like SBIR and STTR as well.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know the exact answer, but I'd say a good number of companies are applying, and many are also being awarded those types of grants. It depends. I mean, we are seeing a more diverse set of companies, and sometimes they're not necessarily applicable to what government funding sources are looking to do, but it's long been a source of capital, and as investors, we love government grants. It's non-dilutive capital. It gives the company more juice without having to dilute our ownership of the company, so we encourage it.
Phil Swan. Can you tell us a little bit about the importance of keeping your cards close to your chest versus getting the word out about what you're doing? What do you see as being critical to being successful, especially as you're working with investors?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and there's no right answer to that. And some entrepreneurs are very secretive about what they're doing. Others are very open, and I've seen it work both ways. I think in the space industry, I forget who was talking about this earlier. Who you have this. I think it was Chris Bachhaus, this culture of secrecy and stealth mode, and we do that in space for some reason. I think it's counterproductive, especially when you're raising capital. There's no bigger turnoff for an investor than like not telling me what you're doing or being secretive about your plans or something like that. And I think, as someone who has also gone out and raised money from investors, it's a network effect. You need to have people talking, and you need to be introduced to the right people and talk to a lot of people about what you're doing and get feedback. So I think, my advice would be to, don't share your technical, secret technical drawings with folks. But as far as your business model goes and your plans, I think I would err toward the side of being more open about it.
Thanks.
Hi, Joe. Jeff Faust. You're talking about this exponential growth in investment. I'm curious what sort of limits you see to that exponential growth, when and how it'll flatten out, and how is it important is it with this investment that's coming in now that we start seeing some exits, some successful exits through M&A or whatever in the next few years?
That's a great question. I think there's a lot of upside still remaining in the industry, because if you compare us to other segments in technology, space is still pretty small. We are also the fastest growing, but there's a lot of room to catch up. And if you think about how diverse and how many different segments there are within the space industry, I mean, there's all kinds of different things. So I think there's a lot of room for continued very rapid growth.
And then on seeing exits?
Oh yeah, so it's we're seeing more. I still think it's early in the industry. I think it really does help. The acquisition, I think it was earlier this week, of Openware is a great story, and we hope to see more of those types of deals. The more acquisitions there are, it reduces risk in the mind of investors. So an investor evaluating a company is primarily interested in risk. What are my chances of getting my money back times 10? And if no companies are being acquired, that's a higher risk that maybe the value of the company goes up really high, but I'll never be able to get my money back. So anything that companies can do or that any external factors in the industry that can help reduce that risk, I think is very positive for the industry.
Doug Messier from parabolicarc.com. How you doing?
Great. How are you?
Great. Were you guys involved in the recent Planetary resources round?
Yes.
Okay. So let me take you through that. Like, you got a round, and then they turned around and sold like half that company to, I guess, the government of Luxembourg for even more money. And then they're getting hundreds of millions or possibly more from the government of Luxembourg, and to do a lot of their basic R&D. So can you comment a little bit on the involvement of these non-traditional governmental roles, such as Luxembourg and Abu Dhabi and New Mexico? How big a deal is that in terms of getting these commercial companies off the ground?
Right, sure. I mean, it's similar. The way I understand it is the Luxembourg government is providing capital to a Luxembourg entity. So it's overwhelmingly positive from an investor perspective in that particular case. But we think about this in a very similar way to the SBIR funding. Some of that government funding is non-dilutive, but in the cases you've mentioned, I think these are actual equity investments that are made by a government. So, there's really, I think it's encouraging. I think the reason we're seeing this is because governments have a longer time horizon than private investors do, so they're willing to make bigger bets on longer term opportunities. I think it's overall a good thing.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Joe. I'm Shanika Veerasundara. I run a small technology law firm, and I also advise startups. A question for you. For the early stage startups that y'all are interested in, what is your investment thesis, apart from the traditional investment criteria applied by the typical angel investment clubs here? In particular, I would like to get to know, what do you look for in an early stage as convincing evidence? Is it, some sort of a revenue? And I know a lot of the companies in this space, revenue is very delayed, so you cannot take that as a serious criteria. And I want to know the IP grants from important institutions. What stage of research are you looking at? And the other thing is what sort of partnerships? And what I want to know is what are the key highlights or the attractive criteria that you find in a very early stage company?
Yeah, so I'll take a crack at that. Our thesis really is to find companies. We look at the market as we see it developing, and we have to look ahead and say, okay, what is going to be happening in the next 5, 10, 15 years? What are the gaps in that roadmap going forward? And we'll try to find companies that can fill one of those gaps. So right now we see a lot of investment and activity in the Earth observation market. So what are some of the things that contribute to that? We know that market is still developing, but if there's a company that really has a chance to help grow that market or participate in the growth of that subsegment, that's what we're looking for. So companies that really fit into our view of the market and where it's going to be going. And as far as what we look for, I think we try to be very objective and look at space companies just like we would look at any other company. I think not all early stage companies have revenue, but we want to make sure that there is a credible path to building a big valuable company. If that's revenue in 6 months or revenue in 3 years, it kind of depends. It depends on the market and what's going on. Does that help? It's kind of a complex question.
Yeah. What about IP and strategic partnerships and things like that?
Right. So we do look at IP. It's important. A sustainable competitive advantage of some kind is really important, and partnerships are important as well. And back to the SBIR comment. So when we're seeing there's a potential government customer that's providing a grant, we see that as a positive. Or we're also seeing now big companies. Like big Fortune 500 or global companies partnering with small companies. So we think that's encouraging, and again, will help to reduce the risk profile of a company.
Thank you.
And now we see, fast forward to 2015, it's over $800 million. So a lot of growth. The number of venture capital investments, there's been 70 venture capital firms investing in one or more space startup in 2015. That's a 4 times increase from the year before, 2015. Also, there's qualitative indicators of the growth and maturation of the market. We've seen in 2016, the space companies just recently graduate from some of the top tech incubators like Techstars and Y Combinator. Also, this really reinforces our view that space is becoming more integrated with other tech sectors and is starting to be on par with some of the other hot investments. 48 hours, we've had 14 new members join our network. Yesterday, we held a lunch for local Seattle angel investors who weren't necessarily able to make it for the whole conference, but it was sold out with a wait list of people in the local investment community who are interested in space and wanted to learn about it. So it's really exciting. All this points towards future growth of the industry. When we first started Space Angels Network 9 years ago now, most space investors were driven by their excitement for space technology, just being involved in something cool or exploration. Today, though, space investing has evolved from a high-risk passion play for a few visionary investors, and in 2016, it's part of the industry, which is really exciting to me personally. So everyone has been talking about commercial space. Everyone has been talking about commercial space and all the exciting progress and news that's going on. What I'd like to do this morning is to share some analysis and insight that we've come up with at Space Angels Network on private investment in space and our view of where the space economy is headed. At Space Angels Network, we see a number of quantitative proof points that show how the space economy and the space investment market is maturing. First of all, the total amount of investment and number of investors in space is increasing. In 2011, total angel and venture capital investment was about $150 million sectors, at least in terms of investment. As a result, Space Angels Network is also growing. Our global network of angel investors has completed 4 investments in 2016 already, and we're on track for our most active year yet. And we have 2 deals in the pipeline that we're working on now. We've also seen 100% year-on-year growth in the membership of in our network. So these are individual investors that are accredited investors who are including space in their asset allocation. And I'm really happy to announce this morning that just earlier this week, we crossed the mark of 200 members in 23 countries worldwide. So we've been growing so fast, and we expect this pace of growth to continue. Even in just the last...
These are some of the best known VCs in the game, like Draper Fisher Jurvetson, Founders Fund, and Lux Capital. Please join me in welcoming Joe.
All right, thanks, Andrew. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for getting up early. I guess not that early, but seemed early. First of all, I wanted to thank the Space Frontier Foundation for putting this conference on and congratulate the whole team. I think it's been an amazing time, tremendous success, and really has brought the industry together. So I'm also looking forward to today, and we get to talk about the financing of space startups and get into some more talk about entrepreneurship in the industry.